you've been asking for stories like this for ages, and after a long search, I've gathered 3 terrifying accounts of school lockdowns. The first story takes place during a typical Friday calculus class. It was 7th period just before spring break, and everyone was restless. Our usually relaxed teacher decided to kill time with an online quiz game. I remember the exact moment everything changed. Right after someone guessed, Adidas, the dean's frantic voice crackled over the loudspeaker, announcing a real lockdown. Our teacher, normally so calm, rushed to shut off the lights and herded us into a corner. The power cut out, plunging us into silence. Then came the screaming. A man's voice, wild and unhinged, echoing through the halls. He pounded on lockers, shouting threats, before slamming against our classroom door. One girl screamed, and for what felt like forever, we braced ourselves. Eventually the noise faded, but the terror didn't. Later we learned an unstable intruder had attacked the front desk and was later found sleeping in a storage closet. Rumor had it he was armed. To this day, I wonder if he was ever caught. The second story happened in October, on a gloomy, rainy day. During first lunch, 4 loud booms echoed across campus. At first, I thought it was thunder, but then chaos erupted. Security rushed us into the multipurpose room, covering the glass walls as adults guarded every exit. A friend asked what was happening and came back with a chilling answer. A mentally disturbed man, a registered sex offender, had barricaded himself near school grounds, threatening violence. We were trapped for an hour before being escorted out. Later, a classmate revealed she'd seen the same man the previous Halloween, smearing his own blood on his window with a terrifying message. What we'd dismissed as a holiday prank turned out to be a warning. The final story is my own. Years later, I returned to my old high school as a tech intern, working in the basement office, a surprisingly cozy space with all the school servers. One day, during lunch, the front office called lockdown. An armed intruder was inside. I killed the lights and waited, texting my coworkers with no response. Then, footsteps. Someone burst into the office, but didn't speak. My phone buzzed. A text warning me about a gunman in a red shirt and hat. I looked up just as the stranger noticed my panic. I bolted upstairs as a gunshot rang out behind me. Police caught the shooter at the exit. Thankfully, the teacher he'd targeted survived, though no one ever learned why he'd been attacked. The sound of that gunshot still haunts me. Each of these stories is a reminder of how quickly normalcy can shatter. And while I hope those involved got the help they needed, the fear of those moments never really fades. The unsettling truth is that schools, places meant to be safe, can become scenes of terror in an instant. These lockdowns weren't drills. They were real, raw fear. And in each case, what stayed with me wasn't just the chaos, but the eerie quiet afterward. The way classmates exchanged glances. The way teachers' hands shook as they unlocked doors. The way normal routines felt fragile for weeks. In the first story, the man's screaming voice still replays in my head. I'll never forget how our teacher, usually so laid back, looked when he whispered, "Stay silent." The second story left me wondering how many warning signs we miss. How someone's cries for help can be mistaken for a Halloween joke. And my own experience? It taught me that danger doesn't always announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it's just footsteps in the dark, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. I don't know if these stories have a lesson other than this. The world can turn violent in a heartbeat. But what sticks with me most isn't the fear, it's the way people reacted. The teachers who shielded students, the friends who grabbed each other's hands, the strangers who stayed calm when everything was falling apart. Maybe that's the only real takeaway. When the worst happens, you see who people really are, and most of the time, even in the darkest moments, they're braver than they think. Looking back, I realize how deeply these realities shape the way I see safety, or the illusion of it. We grow up believing certain places are invulnerable. Schools, libraries, quiet neighborhoods, until reality shatters that trust. What's worse is how familiar these stories have become. You hear about lockdown drills, about threats, about close calls, until they start blending together. But when it happens to you, that's when the numbness fades. The calculus class, the lunchroom, the basement office, they were all just rooms until they weren't. Now, every time I walk into a building, I notice the exits. I notice who's around me. I notice how flimsy a locked door really is. It's exhausting, living with that awareness, but I don't think it'll ever go away. And maybe it shouldn't. But here's what else stays with me. The way people came together. The teacher who stood between us and the door. The janitor who risked his safety to check that closet. The friend who made sure we all stayed close in that multi-purpose room. Even the stranger in the basement, though he turned out to be the threat, made me realize how quickly trust can be weaponized. I don't have a neat ending for this. No grand lesson, no silver lining. Just the understanding that fear leaves marks, but so does courage. And most of the time, you don't know which one you'll be until the moment comes. The strange thing about trauma is how it lingers in the quiet moments. Years later, I'll be doing something utterly mundane, filling my coffee, waiting at a crosswalk, when suddenly, the memo, rye hits with startling clarity. The metallic taste of fear in my mouth during that lockdown. The way my knees locked up under that desk. The sound of my own heartbeat drowning out everything else. It never really leaves you, it just learns to live alongside you like an unwelcome shadow. What's worse is how these experiences change the way you move through the world. I catch myself scanning crowds now, noting potential hiding spots in restaurants, flinching at sudden noises. My friends who went through it with me, they do the same. We don't talk about it much, but sometimes we'll exchange a look when a door slams too loud, and in that moment we're right back there. Yet, there's something almost sacred about that unspoken understanding between survivors. We don't need to explain why we freeze when the PA system crackles to life, or why we can't sit with our backs to the door. There's comfort in that silent recognition, in knowing we're not alone in our hypervigilance. The world keeps spinning like nothing happened, but we know better. We remember how thin the veneer of safety really is, and maybe that's the burden we carry, not just the memories, but the knowledge that normalcy is fragile. All we can do is keep moving forward, one uneventful day at a time, hoping the next lockdown drill stays just that, a drill. And on the bad days when the memories feel too close, we hold on to this. We survived. Against all odds, through luck or instinct or the kindness of strangers, we're still here, and that has to count for something. The weight of these experiences doesn't diminish with time. It simply changes shape. What began as raw terror has settled into something quieter but no less persistent, a heightened awareness that colors every ordinary moment. I notice how schools have transformed since those days. Reinforced doors, panic buttons, active shooter drills as routine as fire drills. These changes are meant to reassure, but they only serve as constant reminders of what could happen. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with this awareness. It's in the way teachers' eyes dart toward the classroom door during a loud noise, how students instinctively calculate escape routes when entering a new space. We've all become unwilling experts in threat assessment, our minds constantly running scenarios we shouldn't have to consider. Yet amid this grim reality, there are glimmers of something like resilience. The dark humor that emerges among those who've shared these experiences. The careful way parents now ask about safety protocols when enrolling their kids. The determination of educators who refuse to let fear dictate how they teach. These small acts of defiance against the unthinkable. They matter. Perhaps what's most unsettling is how these stories have become almost commonplace. Swap a few details, and they could happen anywhere. Suburban high schools, rural elementary schools, university campuses. The locations change, but the underlying fear remains the same. I don't know if we'll ever live in a world where these stories stop being told, but I do know this. We remember the terror, yes, but we also remember Who turned on the lights when it was over? Who checked on the crying kid who made bad jokes to break the tension? These moments of human connection, that's what the fear couldn't take from us. And maybe, in the end, that's what matters most. The paradox of these experiences is that while they isolate us in our private fears, they also bind us together in unspoken understanding. You can spot it in the way a teacher's hand lingers near the lockdown button during a fire drill, or how students no longer laugh off shelter-in-place announcements. There's a collective muscle memory now, a generation conditioned to respond to threats we shouldn't have to imagine, let alone prepare for. I've come to realize trauma isn't just about the moment of crisis. It's about the 1,000 small aftershocks that follow. The way your breath still catches when an intercom buzzes. How you instinctively note the sturdiest piece of furniture in any room. The irrational guilt that surfaces when you realize your school made the news while others didn't. These are the invisible scars we carry. The price of surviving what no one should endure. Yet there's power in this shared vulnerability. When I hear others recount their own close calls, there's no judgment, just nodding recognition. We've developed a shorthand for experience too complex to articulate, a way of saying, I understand, without reopening wounds. This quiet solidarity might be the closest thing to healing we get. The world keeps demanding we move on, but trauma has its own timeline. Some days, I'm fine. Others, a slamming door sends me right back to that darkened classroom. What's changed is I no longer berate myself for those reactions. I've learned to treat my survival instincts with respect that kept me alive after all. If there's any wisdom in these memories, it's this. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. And kindness, the kind shown by strangers in moments of crisis, that's what ultimately outlasts the terror. When everything else fades, we remember who reached for our hand in the dark, and that memory becomes our compass forward. Perhaps that's the final lesson. Not about fear, but about what persists in its wake. The world moves on, headlines change, but the echoes of these moments linger in the way we choose to move through life. A little more alert, a little more grateful for uneventful days, and fiercely protective of the quiet moments that feel like peace. We carry these stories not as wounds, but as proof that even in the darkest corners, humanity flickers on, and that's worth holding on to.